I already covered the worst ways to die in the Jurassic Park movies, but did you know that the movies were based off of books? The books are a completely different genre and have way more brutal deaths. In today's video, I will be giving context and reading excerpts of the 5 most brutal deaths in the Jurassic Park novels. Before we get into this video, make sure to like and subscribe. Number 5. Eddie Carr. Eddie Carr dies differently in the books than he does in the movies. After a raptor smells a candy bar dropped by Richard Levine, they look up and notice the group hiding in the high hide. The raptors then begin to climb into the high hide. But the raptors kept coming. Eddie pulled up one of the aluminum bars from the floor, leaned over the side railing, branching the bar like a club. One of the raptors had already climbed high enough to dart forward, jaws gaping, at Eddie's neck. Surprised, Eddie shouted and jerked his head back. The raptor narrowly missed him, but its jaws closed on his shirt. Then the raptor fell back, jaws clenched tight, and its weight pulled Eddie forward, over the railing. He yelled, "Help me! Help me!" as he started to topple over the side. Levine threw his arms around him, dragging him back. Levine looked past Eddie's shoulder at the raptor, which was now dangling in space, hissing furiously, still gripping onto his shirt. Eddie pounded the raptor on the snout with his bar, but the raptor held on like a bulldog. Eddie was bent precariously over the railing. He might fall at any moment. He jabbed the bar into the animal's eyes, and abruptly the raptor released its grip. The two men fell back into the shelter. When they got to their feet, they saw the raptors climbing up the side of the hide. As they appeared at the rail, Eddie swung at them with the strut, knocking them back. "Quick!" he shouted to the kids. "Up onto the roof! Quick!" Kelly started to climb one of the struts, then pushed herself up easily onto the roof. Arby stood there, his expression blank. She looked back down and said, "Come on, Arb." The boy was frozen, his eyes wide with fear. Levine ran to help him, lifted him up. Eddie was swinging the strut in wide arcs, the metal smacking against the raptors. One of the raptors caught the strut in his jaws and jerked it hard. Eddie lost his balance, twisted, fell backwards, toppling over the side. He cried, "No!" as he fell. Immediately, all the animals dropped down to the ground. They heard Eddie screaming in the night. The raptor snarled. Levine was terrified. He was still holding Arby in his arms, pushing him onto the roof. "Go on," he kept saying. "Go on, go on." From the roofs, Kelly was saying, "You can do it, Arb." The boy gripped the roof, pulling himself up, his legs churning in panic. He kicked Levine hard in the mouth, and Levine dropped him. He saw the boy slide away and drop backwards onto the ground. "Oh, Christ," Levine said. "Oh, Christ." Number 4. George Basilton. George Basilton was one of 3 men hired by Basilton to go to Isla Sorna to steal dino eggs. When the T-Rex sees Basilton, he stands still. But even though he's standing still, the Rex is still looking at him. Straight at him. Sarah and Malcolm watch from a jeep as this is happening. "Are they really just gonna stand there?" said Sarah. "Yes," Malcolm said. "Why?" "They are misinformed," Malcolm said. Dodson watched the lead tyrannosaur come towards him. For such big animals, they were cautious. Only one of the 2 parents approached them, and although it paused to roar fiercely every few paces, it seemed oddly tentative, as if it were perplexed by the fact that the men were staying there. Or perhaps it could not see them. Perhaps he and Basilton has vanished from their view. The other parent hung back, remaining towards the other side of the nest, bobbing and ducking its head, agitated, but not attacking. Of course, the roars of the approaching dinosaurs were terrifying. Dodson didn't dare glance at Basilton, just a few yards away. Basilton was probably peeing his pants right now. Just so he didn't turn and run, Dodson thought. If he ran, he was a dead man. If he stayed perfectly still, everything would be all right. Standing stiffly, keeping his body rigid, Dodson held the anodized box at waist level in his left hand. With his right hand, he slowly, ever so slowly, pulled up the disconnected power cord. In a few moments, he would feel the end plug in his hand, and he would slip it back into the box. Meanwhile, he never took his eyes off the approaching tyrannosaur. He felt the ground shake beneath his feet. He heard the cries of the infant that King had stepped on. Those cries seemed to bother the parents. No matter, just a few seconds more, and he would have the plug back in the power pack, and then... The tyrannosaur was very close now. Dodson could smell the rotten odor of the carnivore. The animal roared. He felt its hot breath. It was standing right by Basilton. Dodson turned his head fractionally to watch. Basilton stood entirely still. The tyrannosaur came close and lowered its big head. He snorted at Basilton. He raised his head again, as if perplexed. He really can't see him, Dodson thought. The tyrannosaur bellowed, a ferocious sound. Somehow Basilton stayed unmoving. The tyrannosaur bent over, bringing his huge head down again. The jaws opened and closed. Basilton stared straight forward, not blinking. With huge, flaring nostrils, the Tyrannosaur smelled him, a long, snuffling inhalation that fluttered Basilton's pants legs. Then the Tyrannosaur nudged Basilton tentatively with his snout, and in that moment Dodson realized that the animal could see him after all, and that the Tyrannosaur swung its big head laterally, striking Basilton in the side, easily knocking him into the earth. Basilton yelled as the Tyrannosaur's big foot came down, pinning him to the ground. Basilton raised his arms and shouted, "You son of a bitch!" just as the head came down on him, jaws wide, closed. The movement was gentle, almost delicate. The next instant the head snapped high, tearing the body. Dodson heard a scream and saw something small and floppy hanging from the jaws, and realized it was Basilton's arm. Basilton's hand swung freely, the metal band of his watch glinting beneath the Tyrannosaur's huge eye. Basilton was screaming, a continuous, undifferentiated sound, and hearing it, Dodson broke into a dizzying sweat. Then he turned and ran, back towards the car, back towards safety, back towards anything. He ran. Number 3, Ed Regis. When the T-Rex first touched the now powerless electric fence, Ed Regis ran away, abandoning everyone. After trudging back through a swamp, he ended up back at the Tyrannosaur enclosure, where he became face to face with one. The juvenile Tyrannosaur shuffled down the path, stopping with every step to sniff the air before moving on. It passed the trees where Regis was hiding and gave no indication that it had seen him. Grant saw Regis's body relax slightly. Regis turned his head, trying to watch the Tyrannosaur on the far side of the tree. The Tyrannosaur was now out of view down the road. Regis started to relax, releasing his grip on the tree. But the jungle remained silent. Regis remained close to the tree trunk for another half-minute. Then the sounds of the forest returned, the first tentative croak of a tree frog, the buzz of one cicada, and then a full chorus. Regis stepped away from the tree, shaking his shoulders, releasing the tension. He walked into the middle of the road, looking in the direction of the departed Tyrannosaur. The attack came from the left. The juvenile roared as it swung its head forward, knocking Regis flat to the ground. He yelled and scrambled to his feet. But the Tyrannosaur pounced, and it must have pinned him with its hind legs, because suddenly, Regis wasn't moving. He was sitting up in the path, shouting at the dinosaurs and waving his hands at it, as if he could scare it off. The young dinosaur seemed perplexed by the sounds and movement coming from its tiny prey. The juvenile bent its head over, sniffing curiously. Regis pounded on its snout with his fist. "Get away! Back off! Go on! Back off!" Regis was shouting at the top of his lungs, and the dinosaur backed away, allowing Regis to get to his feet. Regis was shouting, "Yeah, you heard me! Back off! Get away!" As he moved away from the dinosaur. The juvenile continued to stare curiously at the odd, noisy little animal before it. But when Regis had gone a few paces, it lunged and knocked him down again. "It's playing with him," Grant thought. "Hey!" Regis shouted as he fell, but the juvenile did not pursue him, allowing him to get to his feet. He jumped to his feet. He continued backing away. "You stupid! Back! You heard me! Back!" He shouted like a lion tamer. The juvenile roared, but it did not attack, and Regis now edged towards the trees and the high foliage to the right. In another few steps, he would be back in hiding. "Back, you! Back!" Regis shouted, and then, at the last moment, the juvenile pounced, and Regis got knocked flat onto his back. "Cut that out!" Regis yelled. And then the juvenile ducked his head, and Regis began to scream. No words, just a high-pitched scream. The scream cut off, abruptly, and when the juvenile lifted his head, Grant saw ragged flesh in his jaws. Number 2, John Hammond. John Hammond decided to take a walk when Lex and Tim played a loud T-Rex roar through the speakers. This made Hammond fall down a hill, break his ankle, and come face to face with a horde of compies. Even though Hammond was in peak condition for a man his age, personally, he expected to live another 100 years. It was just a matter of taking care of yourself, taking care of things as they came up. Certainly, he had plenty of other reasons to live, other parks to build, other wonders too. He heard something. He heard a squeaking, and then a chattering sound, some kind of small birds hopping in the undergrowth. He'd been hearing small animals all afternoon. There were all kinds of things out here: rats, possums, snakes. The squeaking got louder, and small bits of earth rolled down the hillside past him. Something was coming. Then he saw a dark green animal hopping down the hill towards him. Then he saw another one, and another one. Compies, he thought with a chill. Scavengers. The compies didn't look dangerous. They were about as big as chickens, and they moved up and down with nervous little jerks, like chickens. He knew they were poisonous. Their bites had a slow-acting poison that they used to kill crippled animals. Crippled animals, he thought, frowning. The first of the copies perched on the hillside, staring at him. It stayed about 5 feet away, beyond his reach, and just watched him. Others came down soon after, and they stood up in a row, watching. They hopped up and down and chittered, waving their clawed hands. Shoo, he said, get out, and threw a rock. The compies backed away, but only a foot or two. They weren't afraid. They seemed to know that he couldn't hurt them. Angrily, Hammond tore a branch from a tree and swiped at them with it. The compies dodged, nipped at the leaves, squeaked happily. They seemed to think he was playing some sort of game. He thought again about the poison. He remembered one of the animal handlers had been bitten by a compy. The handler had said the poison was like a narcotic peaceful dream. No pain. You just wanted to go to sleep. To hell with that, Hammond thought, and he picked up a rock and threw it, striking one compy flat in the chest. The little animal shrieked in alarm as it was knocked backwards and rolled over its tail. The other animals immediately backed away. Hammond turned away and started to climb the hill once more. Holding branches in both his hands, he hopped on his left leg, feeling the ache in his thigh. He had not gone more than 10 feet when one of the compies jumped onto his back. He flung his arms wildly, knocking the animal away, but he lost his balance and slid back down the hillside. As he came to a stop, a second compy sprang forward and took a tiny nip from his hand. He looked with horror, seeing the blood flow over his fingers. He turned and began to scramble up the hillside again. Another compy jumped onto his shoulder, and he felt a brief pain as it bit into the back of his neck. He shrieked and smacked the animal away. He turned to face the animal, breathing hard, and they stood all around him, hopping up and down, cocking their heads, watching him. From the bite on his neck, he felt a warm flow through his shoulders, down to his spine. Lying on his back on the hillside, he began to feel strangely relaxed, detached from himself. But he realized that nothing was wrong. No error had been made. Malcolm was always quite incorrect in his analysis. Hammond lay very still as the child in its crib, and he felt wonderfully peaceful. When the next compy came up and bit his ankle, he only made a half-hearted effort to kick it away. The little animals edged closer. Soon, they were chattering all around him, like excited birds. He raised his head as another compy jumped onto his chest, the animal surprisingly light and delicate. Hammond felt only a slight pain, very slight, as the compy bent to chew on his neck. Number 1, Dennis Nedri. Dennis Nedri was basically the same character he was in the movies, but he gets an even more brutal death in the novel. Nedri started back, heading towards the glow of the car's headlights. He was drenched and miserable. He heard the soft hooting cry once more, and this time he paused. That really hadn't sounded like an owl, and it seemed to be close by, in the jungle, somewhere off to his right. As he listened, he heard a crashing sound in the underbrush, then silence. He waited. He heard it again. It sounded distinctly like there was something big moving in the jungle towards him. Something big, something near, a big dinosaur. Get out of here! Nedri began to run. He made a lot of noise as he ran, but even so, he could hear the animal crashing through the foliage and hooting. It was coming closer. Stumbling over tree roots in the darkness, clawing his way past the dripping branches, he saw the jeep ahead, and the lights shining around the vertical wall of the barrier made him feel better. In a moment, he'd be in the car, and then he'd get the hell out of here. He scrambled around the barrier, and then he froze. The animal was already there. But it wasn't close. The dinosaur stood 40 feet away at the edge of the illumination from the headlamps. Nedri hadn't taken the tour, so he hadn't seen the different types of dinosaurs, but this one was strange looking. The 10-foot-tall body was yellow with black spots, and along the head ran a pair of red V-shaped crests. The dinosaur didn't move, but it gave a soft hooting cry. Nedri waited to see if it would attack. It didn't. Perhaps the headlight from the jeep frightened it, forcing it to keep its distance, like a fire. The dinosaur stared at him, and then snapped its head in a single swift motion. Nedri felt something smack wetly against his chest. He looked down and saw a dripping glob of foam on his rain-soaked shirt. He touched it curiously, not comprehending. It was spit. The dinosaur had spit on him. It was creepy, he thought. He looked back at the dinosaur and saw the head snap again, and immediately felt something wet smack against his neck, just above the shirt collar. He wiped it away with his hands. Jesus, it was disgusting, but the skin of his neck was already starting to tingle and burn, and his hand was tingling too. It was almost like he'd been touched with acid. Nedri opened the car door, glancing back at the dinosaur to make sure it wasn't going to attack, and felt a sudden, excruciating pain in his eyes, stabbing like spikes into the back of his skull. He squeezed his eyes shut and gasped with the intensity of it and threw up his hands to cover his eyes, and felt the slippery foams trickling down both sides of his nose. Spit. The dinosaur had spit in his eyes. Even as he realized it, the pain overwhelmed him. He dropped to his knees, disoriented, wheezing. He collapsed onto his side, his cheek pressed into the wet ground, his breath coming in thin whistles through the constant, ever-screaming pain that caused flashing spots of light to appear behind his tightly shut eyelids. The earth shook beneath him. Nedri knew the dinosaur was moving. He could hear its soft hooting cry, and despite the pain, he forced his eyes open. But he still saw nothing, spots against black. And then the realization came to him. He was blind. The hooting was louder as Nedri scrambled back to his feet and staggered back against the side panel of the car, as a wave of nausea and dizziness swept over him. The dinosaur was close now. He could feel it coming close. He was dimly aware of its snorting breath, but he couldn't see. He couldn't see anything, and his terror was extreme. He stretched out his hands, waving them wildly in the air to ward off the attack he knew was coming. And then there was a new, searing pain, like a fiery knife in his belly. Reaching blindly down to touch the ragged edge of his shirt, he then felt a thick, slippery mass that was surprisingly warm. With horror, he suddenly knew what he was holding: his own intestines. The dinosaur had torn him open. His guts had fallen out. Nedri fell to the ground and landed on something scaly and cold. It was the animal's foot. And then there was a new pain on both sides of his head. The pain grew worse, and as he was lifted to his feet, he knew the dinosaur had had his head in its jaws. And then the horror of that realization was followed by one final wish: that it would all be ended soon. Alright, guys, so those were, in my opinion, the 5 most brutal deaths in the Jurassic Park novels. Do you agree or disagree with my list? Let me know in the comments below. Also, check out Engine 2D. He makes great animations of scenes from the Jurassic Park novels. Anyways, remember to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!